While you might be waking up at 3 a.m., you're not alone if your eyes pop open at 3 a.m. and sleep seems to slip away. In the stillness of the night, with the hum of the world on pause, it can feel like something's off, but the truth is, this early waking is more common than many realize. It often has less to do with something being wrong, and more to do with how our bodies naturally shift over time. One reason this happens is that as we age, our bodies produce less melatonin hormone that helps us stay asleep through the night. This isn't a flaw or a failure. It's just how the body changes. And when that gentle chemical support fades too early, we find ourselves wide awake while the stars are still out. Take Joe, for example. He's 70, retired, and used to be a sound sleeper. But lately, around 3 a.m., he's waking up alert, not stressed, just out awake. After learning a bit more, he realized his body's sleep rhythm had simply changed. The melatonin that used to keep him resting until sunrise now dips out before the night's done. What helped Joe wasn't anything drastic. He started dimming the lights an hour before bed, cut out late screen time, and added a short walk just after dinner. These small shifts helped tell his body it's still nighttime. Now, even if he wakes up early, he finds it easier to drift back into sleep. So if you're finding yourself wide-eyed at 3 a.m., maybe your body's just asking for a little nudgy reminder that rest is still welcome. 1. When melatonin fades too soon. It's a familiar scene for many older adults. You fall asleep just fine, maybe even earlier than you used to. The house is quiet, the lights are low, and your body welcomes rest. But then somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning you're suddenly awake. Not startled, not upset, just awake. The clock says it's far too early to start the day, but your body feels like it missed the memo. That kind of wake-up can feel frustrating, especially if it starts happening often. But there's usually a reason behind it, and it's one that's rooted in how our bodies naturally change over time. One of the most common reasons people in their 60s, 70s, and beyond start waking up during the early morning hours is a natural dip in melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone your body makes to help regulate sleep. When you were younger, it probably worked like a gentle, steady guide, helping you fall asleep and stay asleep through the night. But as you age, your body produces less of it. And what it does make doesn't always last through the early morning hours. That's why around 2 o'clock or 3 a.m., your brain might quietly start pulling you back toward wakefulness even if you'd rather stay asleep. Take Ellen, for example. She's 68, a retired teacher who loves reading historical fiction and gardening in her backyard. For most of her life, she never had trouble sleeping. But over the past year, she's found herself wide awake around 3:15 nearly every morning. At first, she thought maybe it was just a bad habit forming, or that something was wrong with her health. But after talking to her doctor and reading more about sleep patterns in older adults, she learned that melatonin decline is totally normal and likely the reason she was waking up early. It wasn't about stress or worry. It was just her body doing what aging bodies often do. Once Ellen understood this, she stopped blaming herself and started adjusting her evenings. She swapped her phone for a book before bed, made sure her room was as dark as possible, even covering the glowing digital clock, and began taking a short walk after dinner to help set her internal rhythm. These weren't big changes, but they made a real difference. While she still occasionally wakes up early, she now falls back asleep more easily, and when she doesn't, she no longer feels frustrated or confused about it. If you've been finding yourself awake at 3 a.m. and wondering why, know this. Your body may just be asking for a little extra support. Melatonin isn't something you control, but your evening habits can help guide your sleep in the right direction. Small things like dimming the lights early, stepping outside for a short walk before sunset, or creating a calming bedtime routine can gently tell your body it's still time to rest. And sometimes, that little message is all it takes. But sometimes, it's not about what's missing, it's about how your internal clock quietly resets itself over time. 2. When your body's clock shifts ahead, it can feel puzzling to wake up at 3 a.m. with no clear reason, no loud noise, no nightmare, just quiet alertness. You check the time, sigh, and wonder why your sleep ends so early when it feels like it just began. For many older adults, this early waking isn't insomnia or stress. It's actually a sign that your internal body clock has quietly moved forward, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. As we get older, our sleep-wake cycle naturally starts to shift. You might start feeling sleepy earlier in the evening, maybe even before the late news. You go to bed, fall asleep easily, but by the time 3 a.m. rolls around, your body thinks it's had a full night's rest. This phenomenon, often called an advanced sleep phase, isn't something you cause it, it's something that gently unfolds with age. Your body begins winding down earlier and wrapping up its sleep earlier too, especially when your daily routine has fewer time cues like work schedules, school drop-offs, or social plans. Think about someone like Charles. He's 72, recently retired, and lives with his wife in a quiet neighborhood in Oregon. After decades of waking up at 6 a.m. for work, he no longer sets an alarm. But over the past few months, he noticed he was dozing off during evening shows and naturally heading to bed by 8:30 or 9 p.m. At first, he was thrilled to be getting more sleep. But then came the 3 a.m. wake-ups, wide awake, not tired, just not done. It confused him until he realized he was still getting the same amount of rest, just starting and ending earlier than before. Once Charles understood what was going on, he decided to gently stretch his evenings, not with anything intense, just little things. He started reading with a warm light after dinner, took short walks at sunset, and called his daughter a few nights a week for a chat before bed. These small changes helped his body shift his sleep window just a bit later, and now he finds himself waking up closer to 5 a.m., which feels a lot more natural and less disruptive to his mornings. If you've been waking up in the early morning hours and feeling more puzzled than tired, your body might simply be running on an earlier schedule now. And that's not something to fight, it's something to gently guide. A bit more evening light, a quiet activity before bed, or connecting with loved ones later in the day can give your body the subtle signals. It needs to settle into a rhythm that feels more in tune with your life. Sometimes the clock doesn't need fixing, it just needs a little adjusting. Still, even with a well-timed sleep routine, the body can speak up in other ways, especially when discomfort or health changes come into play. 3. When the body speaks at 3 a.m., it's the middle of the night. The house is still, and you're suddenly awake again. Maybe your back feels stiff, or your bladder won't wait till morning. You lie there, eyes open, wondering why this keeps happening. It doesn't feel like stress, and you didn't eat or drink anything unusual. But something inside you pulled you out of sleep. That something is often just your body doing its job, responding to small discomforts or changes that become harder to ignore as we age. One common reason older adults wake up around 3 a.m. is physical discomfort. Over the years, our bodies become more sensitive to things like joint stiffness, bladder urgency, or mild digestive issues. What wouldn't have woken you in your 40s might now be enough to bring you out of a deep sleep. Conditions like arthritis or even mild dehydration can lead to tossing and turning in the dark hours. And when you do get up, maybe just to visit the bathroom, your body shifts from rest mode to alert mode, making it harder to settle back down. Consider Eleanor, who's 76 and lives alone in a quiet Michigan town. She's always been an early riser, but in the past year, she started waking up at 3:30 a.m. nearly every night. At first, she chalked it up to age, but eventually, she began to notice patterns: a dry mouth, some mild heartburn, and the growing need to use the restroom at night. After a few months, she brought it up at her next doctor's appointment. Her physician adjusted the timing of one of her medications and suggested she avoid reclining right after dinner. Eleanor also started keeping a glass of water by her bed and using a small pillow under her knees to ease pressure on her lower back. These weren't big changes, but they made a noticeable difference. Her sleep wasn't perfect, but she wasn't waking up as often, and when she did, she was able to return to sleep more easily. Sometimes, waking up in the early morning isn't about your mind racing, it's your body asking for attention. That doesn't mean something's wrong. In fact, it means your body's still aware and responsive. The key is learning how to listen with kindness. Maybe your mattress needs a little more support. Maybe your last glass of water should be an hour earlier. Or maybe a small stretch before bed helps ease the tension that builds up during the day. These small, thoughtful adjustments can turn frustration into understanding and give you a better chance at restful sleep. Because sometimes, the path back to sleep starts with simply caring for the parts of you that are quietly asking to be heard. Beyond the body's signals, daily habits can also shape your sleep more than you might expect, often in subtle ways. 4. When habits quietly shift your sleep. You might not notice it at first, the way your evenings have slowly gotten quieter. Dinner has crept a little earlier, and bedtime seems to come naturally by 8:30 or 9 p.m. At first, it feels like a peaceful rhythm, especially after retirement. But then comes the early morning wake-up, 3 o'clock or maybe 3:30 a.m., and you're wide awake, staring at the ceiling while the rest of the world sleeps. It's easy to wonder what's wrong, but the answer might be simpler than you think. Your daily habits may have gently nudged your sleep schedule forward without you even realizing it. As life slows down, fewer errands, no more commutes, quieter evenings, your body no longer gets the same external signals that once helped set your internal clock. You may eat dinner earlier, move less during the day, and wind down faster in the evening. All of this tells your brain it's time to sleep, even if the sun hasn't fully set. That's why you might fall asleep easily, but wake up hours before dawn, your body thinking it's already had enough rest. Take Walter, for example. He's 74 and recently retired from a job he held for over 40 years. Without the structure of work, his days began to shift. He'd eat dinner at 5 p.m., fall asleep in his recliner during the evening news, and be in bed by 8:45. He didn't think much of it until he started waking up at 3 a.m. most nights, feeling completely alert. It wasn't stress, it was routine. His body had simply adjusted to the schedule he was unknowingly creating. After realizing the connection, Walter made a few small but meaningful changes. He added a short walk around the neighborhood in the late afternoon, stayed up a bit longer by reading in a well-lit room, and made sure to avoid dozing off after dinner. Nothing dramatic, just gentle shifts to keep his evenings a little more active and signal to his body that bedtime should come later. Within a few weeks, he found himself waking closer to 5 a.m., feeling more rested and less frustrated. Our bodies respond to rhythm, even when we're not trying to set one. When your days become slower and quieter, your sleep can shift too, sometimes without you even realizing it. But that doesn't mean you're stuck with 3 a.m. wake-ups forever. A few thoughtful changes to your evening routine, staying active a little longer, delaying bedtime just a bit, or even brightening the lights during those post-dinner hours, can help guide your internal clock back into a pattern that feels better aligned with your life. Small adjustments, gently made, can turn those early mornings into something less confusing and a little more restful. And sometimes, what wakes you isn't physical, it's something quieter, deeper, coming from within the heart and mind. 5. When the mind wanders in the quiet hours. There's something about the middle of the night that brings certain thoughts to the surface. You might find yourself waking up at 3 a.m., not from a sound or a physical discomfort, but because your mind is quietly stirring. You're not anxious exactly, just thoughtful. Maybe it's a memory, a feeling, or a question that has been quietly sitting in the background during the day, and now, in the quiet, it asks to be heard. As we grow older, life tends to slow down. We have more time to think, and fewer distractions to push those thoughts away. The brain, no longer pulled in a dozen directions by work or family schedules, starts to sift through things that have been stored away: losses, regrets, old friendships, or simply the natural questions that come with aging. This kind of emotional restlessness isn't loud or dramatic, but it can be strong enough to wake you from sleep. And when it does, it can feel like your thoughts are more awake than your body. Gloria, 80, has felt this shift. She lost her husband a few years ago and now lives alone in the home they shared. During the day, she keeps herself busy: calls with the grandkids, tending her roses, watching her favorite cooking shows. But at night, especially around 3 a.m., she often wakes up and finds herself thinking about old conversations, quiet worries, or moments from years ago. It's not fear, And it's not sadness exactly, it's more like her heart asking for space. For a while, she thought there was something wrong with her sleep, but eventually, she realized it wasn't about her sleep at all, it was about needing a quiet moment to reflect. With that understanding, Gloria made a few gentle changes. She started keeping a small notebook by her bed, where she could write down whatever came to mind when she woke up. Sometimes it was a sentence, sometimes a memory, sometimes a prayer. She also began ending her evenings with a small ritual, a favorite song, a scented candle, or even a letter to her late husband that she'd never send. These weren't fixes, but ways of honoring what her heart was holding. Over time, her 3 a.m. wake-ups felt less lonely and more like part of her natural rhythm. If your early waking feels more emotional than physical, that's worth listening to. It doesn't mean you're broken. It might just mean your heart has something to say, and the night is when it finally has the space. Giving yourself permission to feel, to remember, and to express even in a quiet, simple way can bring a sense of calm. Whether through journaling, gentle music, or just taking a few deep breaths, these small acts of care can help settle the mind and let rest return naturally. So whether it's your body, your habits, or your emotions stirring at 3 a.m., there's always something worth listening to. Gentle ways to respond. What 3 a.m. can gently teach us. Waking up at 3 a.m. might seem like an inconvenience at first, but for many, it's a quiet signal that reflects how deeply our bodies, minds, and routines evolve with time. It's not about fixing a problem, but about noticing a shift and learning how to meet it with care. Sometimes the reason is biologic, like when melatonin fades too early, and the body gently drifts toward wakefulness before the sun is up. That was true for Harold, 71, who found himself wide awake in the early hours. By keeping his room darker at night and taking evening walks, he learned to support his body's natural rhythm rather than fight it. Other times, it's about routine. After retirement, Charles began winding down earlier and waking at 3 a.m., feeling fully rested. Once he realized his internal clock had simply moved forward, he adjusted his evenings with a bit more light, conversation, and activity, and the change helped him sleep longer. And then there's the emotional quiet processing that often surfaces at night. Gloria, 80, started journaling after waking with a full heart and memories of her late husband. That small act helped her release what she was carrying and made her early mornings feel less heavy. If you're waking early, try seeing it not as a disruption, but as an invitation to listen to your body, to soften into your emotions, and to gently reshape your habits. A small change in your evening routine, a dimmer bedroom, or a moment of reflection might be all it takes to help sleep return. Sometimes, the quietest hours have the most to teach us.